Then moving to the main topic, what is CDM? CDM is called as like clinical data management, and it is the important phase in the clinical research that leads to the generation of high quality, reliable, and statistically sound data. Okay, so what it is used for, then that will be discussed in the later part. So it includes the entry, verification, validation, and quality control of the data gathered from the clinical trials. So until now we discussed the process of clinical trials, what are clinical trials, what are the terminologies used. So generally speaking, what happens, the patient gets into hospital. If the researcher find it suitable to be like considered for the clinical trial, they ask permission to the subject. Once the subject is agreed and the ICF is signed, that is informed consent, they start the trial. Participant is, they can start their participation into the trial. Okay, then that what like all the data they collect for that subject during their hospital visit is entered into the clinical database. Okay, and then it comes to the clinical data management. So we'll see the later part. We'll discuss that in more details in the next slides. So the CDM is not just managing the clinical data, but like we completely take the ownership of the data and handle all the activities from right from the CRF design. We design the database to the submission to the statistical team, okay, for their analysis. So this is the scope of the clinical data management. The main scope is to collect, validate, and analyze the clinical data. The next is the to design and develop the data collection instruments like the paper CRFs, electronic CRFs, clinical databases, where this data will be entered and stored. Okay, throughout the process. Then we design and develop the tools for the validation. So it is not only we collect the data, we also design and develop the validation tools. There are some like uh, things that we undertake, the steps we undertake to check the validity of the data. And then, so for it we design the edit checks, we perform the user acceptance testing, and all required steps. Okay, then design and develop the tools for analyzing data, like the all the documentation required to undertake that cleaning of the data. So first and foremost is the data capture, that will happen in like on the paper, or the totally completely electronically, or remote data entry. So when right now may almost all the trials are moved to the electronic phase, very few trials are being conducted on the paper. So paper um, CRFs are almost outdated in today's era. So when in case of paper CRF, the data is entered on the paper case report form, right? Like we fill the any form, printed form. Okay, so it is the paper CRF. There will be certain set of questions provided, and the research team on the site will complete the data entry for all the subjects. So that will happen on the paper. So it is called as paper CRF. Then the data entry associate will enter, and then it is being sent to the clinical data management team. So we don't have real-time access to the data. Once we get that hard copy of that CRF, then only we'll be able to process it. In on the contrary, on the electronic CRF, what happens is it is captured in a electronic case report format, like you fill in any university application form or anything, you fill in online, right? So the same way it happens. Database access will be given to the CRCs in the hospital, and they will transcribe the data from the patient files to that electronic data capture database. Okay, so the primary responsibility is of the investigator to enter that data. So all the work which is being conducted in a hospital related to the clinical trial is under the primary responsibility of a research investigator. Okay, principal investigator, we call it as a principal investigator, who is nothing but the primary physician who is responsible for conducting the trial at that hospital or the institute. So as soon as the CRC team or the data entry team at the hospital enters that data into the database, we can see the data, like the CDM team can real time access the data in real time, and they can start immediately processing it. Next one is the remote data entry that happens in case of multiple sites or multi-center study trial. So the data will be entered remotely, not like centrally also, and it is not web based, so no real-time access to the data. We don't have real-time access. So most widely accepted method currently is the electronic data capture. In a final year PharmD also you will learn about this in the in one of your subjects, like the research, how the data collection will happen for the clinical trials. Okay, then this is the data flow for the clinical data management. As we discussed, the subject will get hospitalized, and then the investigator will uh, check the feasibility if subject can participate in a trial. If subject agrees, then the ICF will be signed. Then investigator, if request any samples, that will be sent to the central laboratory, and all the data will be sent to the data managers. Okay, the lab central laboratory will send the lab details to the data managers also. Investigator will send all the details related to that particular patient to the data managers, and also the clinical research associates, CRAs at site, who are called as trial monitors. They will also send the CRF. If the clinical data manager thinks that more clarification is required, there is some discrepancy, there is some issue in the data, then the request will be sent back to the initiator, request initiator, that can be monitor, the study investigator, or the laboratory. Okay, and then once the data manager finalizes the data, the data they uh, once they finalize it, the data is clean, so they send it to the statistical team for their analysis. And then post statistical analysis, data will be sent to the medical monitoring team or the medical writers. They will create the abstract. Medical writers will create the study um report, and then it will be submitted to the FDA, regulatory authority, through the new drug application, that is the NDA. Okay,